again, everybody, and happy Mother's Day. I hope you're good to your Mother's Day evening right now, but you'll be getting this on Monday though. Anyways, hope you had a good weekend. All right, so we are moving on to 7-6, and you'll like it because we're leaving all the fancy identities and formulas, and we're just going to be solving trig equations. And those of you who did well and have a lot of understanding, you'll see this should make a lot of sense. Kind of putting together all of the things that we have learned. And your assignment for the week is page 718, 13 to 55 odd, right? Today is like last week. You have 2 parts to the lesson. This is part 1, and I'll have 3 more problems for part 2, okay? All right, so our first problem is here. 2 cosine of theta plus root 2 equals 0, okay? And they're gonna have one of these type of symbols for us. Your book's gonna have 0 is less than or equal to theta, which is less than 2 pi, meaning your answer has to lie between 0 and 2 pi. And if it landed on 2 pi or 0, you would use 0 because that's part of it, and the answer must be less than 2 pi, so you wouldn't say 2 pi. If you recall from before, 2 pi in this format, this is what we do, our interval notation. 0 is included, that could be an answer. 2 pi is past the interval, it cannot be an answer. Same with 360 here. So we'll see that in our work. All right, first step, we're going to get our equation and isolate our function here. So I'm going to move the root 2 over, it'll be negative, and then divide by 2. Cosine of theta is negative root 2 over 2, right? Okay, a couple things now. We're going to go, we're going to be getting to places now where we're going to get angles that I don't know the answer to. So root 2 over 2, I know that's a 45, but it could be like a decimal or a fraction, and that's what we're moving into. So for this first example, you have one that you know, but let's practice how to do that on our calculator. First of all, once I get the angle alone, it's negative. I have to decide, because my calculator won't tell me, which ones I want. For cosine, if you remember it's x, it's left and right. So for cosine to be negative, I want the angle over there, and over there I want those two. And when I go on my calculator, it's going to give me the reference angle. And if you should recall in the back of your memory somewhere that we learned before that we don't put the negative in because it'll act differently, especially on the cosine function, which we have right here. So my notation next would be arc cosine of root 2 over 2, I'm just making it positive, equals theta. This will give me my reference angle. Okay, you can practice on the calculator. I'm going to do arc cosine, so I'm going to hit my second function, cosine, do an arc cosine of root 2 over 2, so I'm going to put in root 2 divided by, where is that, 2, and that's going to give me my angle, and it's in 45 degrees, okay? Now our particular problem here, let's go ahead and set this up. We'll be in radians, so 45 degrees in radians, if you remember how that works. This is 1 pi, so 45, there are 4 of those going around, all 45s are pi over 4. So my reference angle is pi over 4, and note that's not going to be one of my answers, that's my reference angle. Okay, so that's really important to note. And I want to get that reference angle because I always have to go find the other angles, okay? This would be 4/4 pi, so if I back off 1, that's going to be 3/4 pi, so these are my answers. 3 pi over 4, and this will be 4/4, and one more would be 5 pi over 4. Those are my 2 answers for theta. Okay, all right, problem number 2. Come on over here. Okay, I'm in radians again, and we're doing 1 time around the circle. You'll see later that we're going to go to more than 1 time around the circle. So this is important that we know what we're doing here and pay attention to that. Get my function alone. Secant squared of x, I'm going to divide by 3. That's going to be 2. Okay, and now it's not alone, it's squared. So to undo the square, I'm going to square root, and if you recall when you put the square root in, when you introduce it to the problem, that you always have to look for the positive or the negative value. Okay, that will get me secant plus or minus root 2. Okay, and now I have one of the odd functions, one of the reciprocal functions, or secondary ones I'll call them. We can't do that on our calculator, so whose partner is secant? It's cosine. So I'm going to flip this. It'll be cosine of x equals, and this is going to be 1 over root 2. I'm flipping that as well. And it's also plus or minus. And if I clean this up by multiplying by root 2 over root 2, cosine of x equals plus or minus, that's going to be root 2 over regular 2. It's root root 2 over 2 again. But watch what's happening now. It's another 45 degree. I would go on my calculator. I'll write the notation. Our cosine of root 2 over 2. Notice I'm putting the positive only in. It will give me the value of x, and x would be pi over 4 in radians, or it could be a decimal if you did it in your calculator. Notice I want positive or negative. For cosine to be positive, it's in quadrants 1 and 4. For cosine to be negative, it's in quadrants 2 and 3. So I want all 4 of them this angle. So I have 4 answers. I just want all my pi over 4s. This is pi over 4. 2/4, that's 3/4. Okay, that's 4/4 again, 5/4. And my last one, if you're going to come all around, that would be 8/4 or 2 pi. So I'm going to back off 1. That's 7 pi over 4. And that is really helpful to calculate our angles in that way that I do it. All right, so I have 4 there because I had plus or minus. Okay. All right, our last one, this one's pretty different. I have a cosine squared and a cosine. I can't get those alone. So in this particular problem, I'm looking to factor it. So I'm going to make it equal to 0, and I'm going to factor it. Okay, and this is the long way of factoring. I'm going to show it to you again here. You can do it in your problems. A lot of the problems in the book have this, so you kind of need to know how to do it. Okay, so I'm going to move the 2 over to make it equal 0 this time. Again, notice I can't make cosine equal, I can't get cosine theta alone, because there's different terms. They're not like terms. One's squared, one's regular, so I have to do something different. So we're looking to factor. So 3 cosine squared theta plus cosine theta minus 2 equals 0. And now what we're thinking is we're really thinking in terms of 3x squared plus x minus 2 equals 0. And I'm going to try to factor that trinomial. It has a number in the front. These are the hard ones. So I draw my x over there. 3 times negative 2 goes up on top. Negative 6. The middle number goes on the bottom, 1. Okay, and I need to find 2 numbers that I can put in here that will add, multiply to negative 6 and add to 1. Okay, and I'm going to substitute those in here. So my numbers here are 3 and negative 2. Notice 3 times negative 2 is negative 6. And 3 plus negative 2 is positive 1. That's what I'm looking for. I'm going to put those in here. I'm going to eliminate this guy, put those in its place. So rewriting the problem. 3x squared plus, here comes my new values that I got. 3x minus 2x. Notice I have to put the x in there to make them the same as that. Minus 2. And I have a grouping problem now. So I'm factoring that by grouping, doing these two. I can take a 3 and an x out here. Times x plus 1. Over here I can divide by negative 2 times x plus 1. Okay, and if you remember how this works, I'm going to factor out the x plus 1. So I end up with one binomial of 3x minus 2 and one of x plus 1. Okay, all right, if you remember though before that I put x's in for cosine, so each one of these is a cosine really. So this is really 3 cosine of x minus 2, and this other one is cosine of x plus 1. I'm going to set those each equal to 0, as we do when we factor, and now I solve these two parts. Right? So the first one, I'm going to add 2 and divide by 3. Cosine of x equals 2/3. Yeah, no, that's one I don't know the value of. I'm going to have to go on my calculator and get that. For cosine to be positive, I'm going to want it to be over in these two values. All right, for the other part of the problem, I'm going to subtract the 1. Cosine of x equals negative 1, and that's one of the values I know. It's right there on the circle. And we didn't talk about it here, but in this particular problem, my restriction, we're in degrees. So I know that answer. There's only one of them that's 180 degrees. So that's one of my answers. Okay, and then I have 2 more coming for this one here. So I'm going to go on my calculator, make sure you're in degrees, which I am, and I'm going to do arc cosine, second cosine of 2/3, 2 divided by 3. Don't waste your time calculating it out. Close your parentheses. That's my reference angle, 48.2 we'll call it. So my reference angle is 48.2. That's how big that opening is, and that is. So this top one is 48.2 degrees. And the bottom one, I'm going to take 360 and subtract 48.2, and that's what the name of that angle is. Because I'm really looking for this angle and all the way around, but I'm not quite at 360. I'm short by 48.2. So 360 minus, can't see my minus, there it is, 48.2 will give me 311.8, and that's my other answer. 311.8 degrees. And those are my ankle answers there, excuse me. Also, don't be surprised if in your problem you end up with like a common thing they'll do. This could be like, if it was a 2 maybe, this would be a 2, this would be cosine equals -2. Well, you guys remember that sine and cosine can only go up to 1. So if you get undefined on your calculator, don't think you're doing the problem wrong, you're probably doing it right, and there's just no answers for that value. So that's pretty common in here, so watch out for that. That's the end of part 1. Thank you.